My name is Amanda Quick, and I survived being a sex trafficker's wife.
Hi all, it's Zoe here. Thanks for hanging out with me again today and joining the Surviving with Zoe podcast, a conversation where amazing, inspirational survivors from all walks of life share their personal stories and expert advocates educate you, our audience, in order to break stigmas and taboos regarding mental health and trauma. Kind of like free therapy and permission to always give yourself grace and compassion as we're ultimately all just surviving every day. Before we dive in, we would like to add a trigger warning for anyone that is vulnerable to particular issues. Please pause if needed and check out our timestamps in our description if you need to skip ahead. Lastly, if you could please hit the subscribe button and follow us on Spotify, Apple, Instagram, and TikTok. We would really appreciate it since we are a new pod. We need all the love we can get. And of course, we want to amplify our guests' voices. Our guest today, Amanda Quick, is the author of her own best-selling story of survival, A Sex Trafficker's Wife, and currently also has a documentary, The Sex Trafficker's Wife, airing right now in Sweden and Norway. She is also a TedX speaker and the creator of Sacred Unmuting. Amanda helps high-performing women break free from the silence that shrinks them. Amanda joins us today to talk about what it really takes to unmute your life, the cost of silence, the unexpected gifts buried in our darkest chapters, and why the most dangerous thing a woman can do is finally tell the truth about who she is. Welcome to Surviving with Zoe, Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Amanda, I'm excited to talk to you. Your story and message is really powerful, and I'm so inspired by it. Just take us back to the beginning and tell us your story.
Yeah, so I usually start the story at the beginning when in 2016, so now 10 years ago, when I was a full-time stay-at-home mom. I had 3 kids. They were 1, 4, and almost 6. And my whole life was my kids. I had stopped working. My husband worked full-time, so I had the privilege of being home with my kids, and my kids were my life. And I would have said my marriage was doing well enough. We had young kids. We didn't spend much time together. He worked a ton, but I chalked it up to being this was the season that we were in. And while my husband worked long hours, one night in April of 2016, he did not come home from work, and I did not know where he was. And so that had never happened before. He would often not answer the phone. He would often be very late, but this was new. And he had texted me when I assumed he was on his way home at about 8 or 9 at night, and asked if there was like dinner or something. And I said yes, and I assumed I would see him in 10 minutes. And when an hour went by and he wasn't there, I tried calling and no pickup. Eventually it went to voicemail. And I figured he got caught up with something, and I just went to bed because I had a nursing baby. So I went to bed and woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning to feed the baby, and he wasn't there. And after I fed the baby, I got up and I looked around. The car he had taken to work wasn't outside. And then I didn't really know what to do because I couldn't exactly go look for him. I had 3 sleeping kids in the house. I actually did try to call the hospitals at that point, just because, at this point I've got stuff running through my head of what if. Nobody had him, and I tried to go back to sleep. About 5 o'clock in the morning, I woke up again, still not there. At this point, this was, a full night, and I got the idea to call non-emergency dispatch. And so I called the non-emergency line and said, I know it's not been 24 hours, but his husband didn't come home, never happened before, I don't know what to do. Is there anything else we can do? And they said, well, let me transfer you to the jail. And then if he's not there, call us right back. And I'm like, okay, I'll call you right back, right? Just they're going through their check boxes. So they transferred me to the jail, and they picked up, and I asked if they had him. And the shock of my life was when they said, yes, we have him. And what charge? Like, this makes no sense. And that's when they told me he was arrested for attempted human trafficking and had a $250,000 bond. And I didn't even know what that meant. I about dropped the phone. I just totally couldn't even, my head goes to this like movie scene of shipping containers and borders, and we're in this really small little Colorado town. So like, this doesn't make any sense. And like, do they have the wrong person? Is he actually dead in a ditch somewhere and somebody stole his wallet? Like, that's the sort of off the wall ideas that I have, because I'm so incredibly confused. And also it kind of sets me in this, okay, well, I got to go figure this out. Like, something bigger is going on here. And I called bail bondsmen. I called lawyers. I mean, it's like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm just calling every number I can find. Bail bondsmen actually pick up the phone at that time and talk to me about, how I could potentially get him bailed out, what the process is in Colorado. Every state is a little bit different. But basically, he would be charged in a couple of days, and usually the amount of money would drop. So like, if you can wait it out a couple days kind of thing. And they were talking me through the process. And then actually a lawyer called me back about 7 a.m, agreeing to let me come into his office at that point. So, I'm wide awake trying to figure out how do I fix this? And I'm a doer. I'm a solver. There's a problem. I've got to get into it. And so that kind of set me in this, he's in trouble. I need to help, because none of this makes sense. Never crosses my mind that any of this could be real. It never crosses my mind that he's actually a predator. Like, that's not the train of thought that I have. Mm-hmm. And so I called his mom even. His mom came to see me that morning, and we're just trying to go figure all of this out. We do try to go visit him at the jail even. I didn't know you can't just show up at jail saying I want to see somebody. Like, this is how unaware I am about any of this. Mm-hmm. And so eventually, I get in touch with the lawyer, start talking to him. He's able to talk to my husband and call the jail on a non-recorded line. And I start to get little threads, but only little threads, because the lawyer is allowed to tell me what he allowed him to tell me. And he's kind of talking about this, that like this ad in a paper or something. And I'm just like, huh? Like, it does not compute, because I cannot put A and B together here. Mm-hmm. And we end up going to the bond hearing a couple days later, and, he's in the orange jumpsuit. He hasn't showered in 2 days. It looks like he's about to be crying and, in the middle. And there's multiple defendants in this case. So each day we get new pieces of information. Yeah. Each day there's just drips of pieces, and we're still not gathering all of it. And so we start to realize there's more defendants in this case. They're all charged with the same thing. Some of them do get their bond reduced, but in my husband's case, it doesn't. They actually think they can charge him with more, not less. Wow. So we start to just this is serious, but we still don't even really know how we got here. An article in the paper comes out a few days later that has more details than I have. And it talks about it was a sting operation. And so basically the defendants were charged with trying to purchase either one or both of an 11 and 14-year-old girls. And in my ex's case, he wanted both of them. And there was a bunch of other things that we didn't have yet, but they kind of talked through the setup of the sting. And for those who, are wondering, these were not real children. These were pretend children that they, had pictures of, essentially, but there wasn't actually kids behind this. This was more of a setup type scenario to see who in this area would be on the lookout for such things. Mm-hmm. And so I do eventually, once his bail doesn't get reduced, I decide I need to get him out of there, because I'm still he doesn't belong here. Something else is going on. I don't understand. So I decide I need to bail him out. So we had access. He had a bunch of stock in the company he worked for. He worked for a credit card processing company. And so we had access. Basically, I cashed out a bunch of our investments in order to bail him out. Mm-hmm. And, people are confused why I would have access to money like that. But we were in a privileged position where I was able to do so. And thankfully, I was able to get him out. And when I got him out, that was the first time I actually got to hear his perspective, right? Because they don't, when they're in jail, they can't tell you anything. Everything is recorded. Everything is. And so he gets in the car after I get him out, and he just starts crying, get me out of here. And I'm waiting for what's going on. You need to we need to tell me, because this is actually you. And yet, what's going on? And so his version of the story was that he had been soliciting adults his entire, like, since he was 20 years old, which was news to me.
Yeah.
And he's talking to me like, this is a totally flippant thing, no big deal. I've been seeing escorts, but when they offered children, I didn't think it was real. And so all these things, I'm just sitting here going, what is this man even telling me? So he's basically admitting to soliciting prostitutes. He's calling them escorts since he was 20, and he was now in his late 30s. Our entire marriage, our entire relationship. And that they had offered children, and his story is he didn't think it was real. He was trying to figure out if it was real so he could report it. That was his story. He was the vigilante, good guy doing the bad thing.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to wrap my head around all of this information he's just dropped in my lap. I have no emotional reaction to it, because at this point I've been in a state of shock for 3 days, and I pick him up, and now he tells me this other piece. And then he starts crying about they're going to go to prison and all these things, and this isn't what happened, and they wouldn't listen to me. And I'm just like, just hold your horses, because I have to drop him off at his mom's house because he's not allowed to be around the kids while he's on bond. And I'm just like trying to get through each day, each moment.
Yeah.
I can't process any of what he's telling me. And so it's kind of at this point that we sort of switch gears to trying to figure out how to support him through the criminal trial, because I'm doing my damnedest to believe him. Everything in me can't even look at what could possibly be real or not. And all I can do is going, this is what I know to be true about who I am and who he is in my life. And this is what he's saying. It still doesn't really make sense, but we have to get through the next pieces. And my kids are little. They're babies. My little one was still nursing. I think we were in like preschool and kindergarten. Like, they're little, and they're starting to ask where dad is. When is he coming home? They think he's on a business trip because he did that a lot. And I don't have any good answers. I don't know how you tell a very young child anything about, sex, let alone prostitution and all these other things. And I'm still trying to believe that he's innocent, at least of what they're charging him with. And so I'm in this really, really interesting place where I'm trying to hold everything together. I'm trying to hold my family together. I'm trying to keep my kids stable. I'm trying to emotionally support my husband, because I'm also had been financially dependent on him. And I'm terrified that I'm going to end up on my own with these kids, or what's going to happen. And all of these stories of even my own childhood are running through my head, because my dad was removed from my life when I was 9 years old. And I don't feel like I had ever really recovered from that. And I didn't want that for my kids. And so it was so wrapped up in all of these, I have to, in order for my kids to be okay, I have to support him. I have to stay. I have to figure this out. I have to believe him, that I really couldn't see anything else. And what this created was a really strong trauma bond, because at this point, the newspapers were out. Everybody was asking me questions. I, deactivated social media, shut everything out. I didn't want to talk to anybody, but I was also incredibly isolated. And so the only person I could talk to about what was happening was my husband, because he was the only one who understood and also wasn't able to talk to all these people. And we kind of created this bubble of universe where if we stuck together, we could keep the family together and the kids okay. And it was us against everybody else. And this was survival. Yeah. And a lot of people who haven't been in this type of situation really don't understand what happens to you when you go through a really shocking, traumatic experience, and that you actually are drawn to even become closer to the person who caused it. Yeah. But that's essentially what a trauma bond is. And you're very protective of that trauma bond, because it's the only thing that is keeping you stable. Yeah. And so it got to the point I felt very guilty that he was excluded from the family. So but he wasn't allowed to talk to the kids, but he could kind of hear them on the background. So we would be on the phone more and more and more. And it got to the point where we were on the phone literally 24/7. He was in my ear at all times, which meant I didn't have a thought without him being there. I'll go about my day without him in my head. And so it was completely rewriting my sense of self, even just as I'm going through this. If I started to have a thought or thinking about what happened and have an emotion come up, or anger come up, or sadness come up, he would immediately react and respond. He would show up at the house. He would have flowers. He would leave stuff in the mailbox. I wasn't allowed to feel anything because this is the rock bottom. I'm a changed man, and blah, 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 blah. And he was giving all of his attention. All of the love bombing was happening because we eventually got supervised visitation with the kids, and he would show up with new toys and new things. And it was 2 hours of daddy present time. And the kids were so excited. But this was a version of their father they had actually never experienced. Yeah. So everybody was getting all of this extra attention, and everybody was all these things. So it felt like I had no choice but to keep going because the kids were doing all of this. And I wasn't even allowing myself to even consciously think about any of it. And so as you go through the criminal process, which is very slow, the charges changed a couple different times. We had some evaluations done, which had, again, new disclosures. Every time there was another layer of another thing. The prosecution wanted to see if he was a candidate for probation. So they send them to get evaluated. At that point, he was admitting to over 100 different prostitutes over his lifetime. Later evaluations, the numbers kept doubling and changing. He also was admitting to men and women. So any semblance of an idea that I had that he was only interested in women and girls was removed. And it wasn't that I cared necessarily. It was just another thing he didn't share, another truth he didn't say. Through this whole time, I was pregnant, I was nursing, he was putting my health and my kids' health at risk. All of that, those emotions would come up. Mm-hmm. And as part of that process, at 10 days after he was arrested, I also found out I was pregnant with what would have been my fourth child. Mm. And so I made a very hard decision to terminate that pregnancy, which is not something I ever had thought I would be in a position to be willing to do. And so there was so much just in this one moment that I was living through that until the criminal case was over, I couldn't even begin to start to process any of it. Yeah. And in the state of Colorado, this is another big shocker for people, but in the state of Colorado, you do not automatically lose your right to parent as a sex offender unless the child is your direct victim. And so what ended up happening is they offered him a plea deal that if he pled guilty to attempted solicitation of a minor, which was a lesser charge, that he not only would have only probation, but he also would regain his ability to move back into the home and be a father. And he would be put on probation as a sex offender, which does come with restrictions for other children, but not your children. And so they were giving him this deal that basically was no consequences and he could move home. So I had been this whole time thinking, if you're really innocent, if you've had all these things that you were going to go turn it in, shouldn't we fight this? And the reality was, I don't even know if any of that was true at this point. And the lawyers were basically like, their case is pretty slam dunk. If you fight this, you're going to jail. If you take this plea deal, at least you'll do probation and move on. And so in January of 2017, he pled guilty, received only 4 years of probation, and was able to actually move back into the house. Which at the time I was grateful for. Okay, now we've gone through this. Now we can put our life back together, because he did lose his job. He did, there's all these other things, but now we can figure out, because in my mind, I'm still thinking people recover from infidelity all the time. That's how I'm trying to frame this in my mind. I don't like it, but I've got a family. I've got kids. I can't leave and do this on my own. And so I have to figure out how to move past it. That's what I'm telling myself. Mm-hmm. And I'm still unwilling to look at this as anything other than he had basically a sex addiction and there was some infidelity. Yeah. And so the next big thing is I end up needing to go back to work. And so I realized that his mental health is only getting worse, not better. And so something I learned later about abusers, specifically those with personality disorders, is once that level of exposure starts to come, he's been exposed essentially, his mental health was just declining rapidly. And so he was already diagnosed with major depression and anxiety, and he basically got to a place where he couldn't function anymore. And he couldn't focus on anything, he couldn't do anything. So I was like, I can't be dependent on him anymore. And I knew I wasn't going to make the same money he made, but the longer I wait, the longer the employment gap is. I have to start somewhere. And my youngest at this point was 2, so I ended up going back to work just after he turned 2. And the going back to work was the first time in a year that my thoughts were my own for 8 hours a day.
Wow.
Because he was not in my head anymore. He couldn't be in the headphones or in the room while I was at work. And so it started to allow me to have thoughts of my own. It was actually really disorienting and uncomfortable at first because I was so used to that. Yeah. And my thoughts were my own, but my body was my own, all of these things all of a sudden while I'm at work. And work ends up becoming my escape for a little while because I wasn't just a mom and a wife. I wasn't somebody who went through this. I tried to keep my work from knowing anything about anything. I wouldn't even say his name in case somebody had read the paper. Like I did not want to be associated. I later learned that they actually did know when they hired me, but I didn't know that because it's such a small town. It's like a 20,000 people town, but to their credit, they didn't tell me they knew. They didn't say anything. So they allowed me to kind of share what I was comfortable with without exposing anything. And so work ends up being a new good thing, but what also ends up happening is because I start to have the separation, the emotions about what had happened actually start to bubble to the surface. And I start having a really hard time being in this marriage anymore. And he wants, when I come home, he wants to be all excited and, we're this happy family again. And I'm like, I can't look at him. Yeah. And he's trying to be intimate with me, and all I can see is this is what he said to them, this is the way he looked at them, this is like, it's like there was ghosts everywhere. Yeah. And I tried to numb myself with alcohol. I would come home and drink a half a bottle of wine, and then I can talk to you. I realized after a couple of months that was not very healthy, and there was a bigger problem. So I just kind of went through all of these stages of I've tried so hard to keep this family together. How do I allow it to unravel? I started having feelings for a coworker. I started having this crush on a coworker because, he wasn't attached to these things. And all of this bubbling to the surface, I didn't know what to do with. And eventually I decided that I couldn't, the alcohol wasn't healthy, all of these things, I needed to tell my husband the truth. Because things with the coworker the flirtations were escalating, all of these things were escalating. And I said, I know what it's like to be cheated on. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be honest about how I'm doing, where I'm at, what I want, and we'll have to figure this out. And so I told my husband that this was going on and that I was interested in pursuing something because I'm not doing okay. And he actually at first tried to talk me out of it. And then he said, you know what? You go do you. I'm not going to move out. I'll just move downstairs and we'll keep the family together. So he would pull on all of these, keep the family together. He knew that was my thing. And you just go date and have fun and we'll be here. And so I go and date my coworker for a little while. And after a few months, I end up getting promoted at work and I'm going to be my new boyfriend's boss. And at this point in time, my kids start behavior starts changing. And I'm like, this is too messy, too complicated. I need to sort my marriage out. So I break things off and I come back to my husband and he thinks, okay, we're even now. Even now, we can get back together. And I'm like, excuse me, I'm only seeing more clearly as the time goes on, not interested at all. I'm starting to see the manipulations, I'm starting to see the behavior, but I still think it's more like he's just an asshole and that's my problem. But I have this, he's a good dad, the kids need him. I'm still running this story. And so I don't want to get back together. I'm still pretty angry. I'm still not really processing all these things. And so his reaction to that is to file for divorce. To file for divorce and to try to kick me out of the house. So he tries to use the legal system to kick me out of the house. He's trying to establish himself as the primary parent and remove me from the kids' lives. Yes. Yes. And I'm more angry at this than anything else because of everything that I had done to fight, to keep my kids. It's like, now you want to blow their lives up? And, I start just, who the hell does he think he is? Get the lawyers involved. His attempt to kick me out of the house doesn't work. He ends up being asked to move. We actually purchased a home in the same neighborhood. So he was like my next door neighbor, which at first I'm like, we'll keep this weird neighbor family and we'll have space from each other. I'm thinking I just need space because again, I'm still so focused on how do we make this as simple for the kids.
Yeah.
So he moves, and then we begin what turns out to be an 18-month-long $75,000 custody fight because he retained his constitutional right to parent. The prior arrest did not immediately impact his parenting rights at all. And so in the custody, the family court, it was a history, yes, but it unless I could prove that these children were in direct danger today, it was irrelevant to the child custody case. Which is still infuriating, but a reality that many people are in. And so we ended up having kind of a shared custody arrangement temporarily. So the kids were going back and forth like 4 times a week or some ridiculous amount. They were next door, but still that's a lot on small children to be moving between households.
Yeah. And
their behavior only gets worse. Because he's the video games, sugar, if you don't cry, I'll give you a piece of candy person. And they come to me and they were like detoxing from sugar and screens. And I'm trying to hold boundaries and keep them on their routines. And it's not working. And their behavior is escalating. It gets to the point where they were physically fighting to even come to my house. And so there was clear signs of parental alienation involved. He would tell them things like, Mommy left us. Mommy won't forgive Daddy, and that's why we can't live together. Which was only confusing them, painting me as I'm doing this to them.
And how old were they at this point?
At this point, they're like 3, 6, and 8. So
they can understand what he's saying.
Exactly.
That's terrible.
Exactly. Terrible. In fact, my 3-year-old at one point in time said, Mom, are you going to go have another baby and leave us? Like a 3-year-old doesn't come up with this on their own.
Yeah.
Right. So it's all of this stuff is going on. And I'm still trying to say, he's just an asshole and I just have to deal with this.
Yeah.
And then things, so we're trying to settle we go to mediation. I eventually realized that I can't figure out how to put this together. And so we hire a parental rights evaluator and she gets involved. And so I'm like, somebody else can figure this out. Because none of this makes sense. The court says he gets 50-50, but that doesn't feel good. But I can't prove enough to take away anything else either. So how do I do this? He's got restrictions. He can't take them. He can't go where other kids are. But he's supposed to somehow be able to do full-time parenting. So the parental rights evaluator also has psychological evaluations done on both me and him. And I was very relieved to know that I was normal because at this point you start to feel like the crazy person. Anybody who's been in any kind of situation where there's this type of gaslighting manipulation, you feel like you're nuts. And they really try to point out all of the ways that you're the problem. And so I was relieved to be psychologically normal. He was diagnosed with not just major depression and anxiety, but also dependent personality disorder and later passive-aggressive personality disorder, which I didn't know what that was. But he had become so dependent on me to meet his mental and emotional needs, and he was now becoming dependent on the children to meet those needs. And that's where it got scary, because if he's dependent on them to meet his needs, where is this going to escalate?
Yep.
And so we're going through the process, but none of these things even in with all of this information, is actually enough to get parenting time removed. And so I'm at this place where I was like, I don't even know, like, something big enough has to even happen for people to, like, unfortunately, the systems, the family court systems especially, they're not protective, they're punitive. And so something has to already have happened that you can prove.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the terrifying place as a parent to go, none of this is right, and yet nothing that I can prove has happened. And so things then got worse. And so after we kind of did this first round of things, my middle son started disclosing inappropriate behavior. And so I was driving to work, and I'm like preparing for this presentation this morning. So I'm like not paying attention to what the kids are saying, and I'm going to drop them off at school. I'm repeating in my head, and goodbye, have a good day, all of that. And he stops and he looks at me and he says, "Sometimes I suck on daddy's fingers." And I'm just going, what? Like, but you can't react. You can't say anything. It was, have a good day. What the hell did my child just say?
Yeah.
I called my lawyers. I tried to call that particular child was in a play therapy. What do I do? They told me, my lawyers, you can't make new accusations in a high conflict divorce. You will then be seen as the one causing the problems. So we said, talk to the therapist. The therapist said, ask him to show you what that means. Okay. So I asked him to show me what that means. It was like a week or so later, and he showed me a thumb going in and out of his mouth. And I called the therapist back, and she said, well, if he had done that in my presence, I would have been mandated to report it. So the lawyer said, with her saying that, you can report it without, you're following professional advice. You're not, acting. So I reported it to Child Protective Services. A little bit before that, I had picked him up early from school. He had some like presentation, and he was very excited to go home with me and spend one-on-one time, because as a middle child, he doesn't get a lot of that. And he wanted to watch a movie and all these things. And he like climbs into my lap and like tries to kiss me. I was like, whoa, stop.
Whoa. Yeah.
And, he's 6.
Yeah.
And so I'm starting to see these behaviors coming out of him that have this underlying energy of really inappropriate sexual behavior. And I'm no dummy. I know exactly where this is coming from, but I can't prove what is happening either. And so, of course, it's at this moment I go, wait, this was the man who was arrested for trying to purchase children. Yeah. Hello, wake the frick up, Amanda, right? This is not just a man who with a sex addiction. This is so much deeper than that. Yeah. And now I'm in a high conflict divorce, and I have to, how am I going to protect my kids from this? Yeah. Because if I had left him in jail, that would be one thing, but we're not there, and I can't go back in time. And so that's my rock bottom, is realizing that I still have to hand my kids over 4 times a week to this man. And Child Protective Services did nothing. They talked to probation, said probation cleared him, all good. And I'm just supposed to be okay with sending them over again.
Could I just interrupt? So they knew about these statements that your 6-year-old son, how did they clear it?
They gave them a polygraph. So in sex offender probation, they polygraphed them. And I later found out the questions they even asked him were not related to the statements my son said.
Okay.
So they have their protocol where they do polygraphs, and they pretty much trust these polygraphs implicitly. Yeah. And they're polygraphed regularly as part of the probation. And so they cleared him by asking him whatever questions and he's compliant. And probation, he was exceptionally compliant from probation standpoint because he paid the probation bill. Most of the people they deal with don't pay the probation bill, and that's what they're chasing down. They never enforced, he was supposed to get a job. They never enforced that. There were so many requirements to probation that he didn't do, but because he paid the probation bill, they didn't actually enforce.
I'm so sorry, Amanda. It's just so crazy to me that, the worst things that can happen in your life come down to like money and like rules. Like, you're right. Yeah.
And so at this point, I feel like there's my every instinct in me wants to take my kids and leave the country, right?
Yeah.
But I would be charged with kidnapping if I did that.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you're in this really impossible position where I can see the writing on the wall. None of these things, none of this is moving the needle. Everybody's still saying he should get 50-50 and we just have to deal with it. And how am I supposed to protect my kids? Because all I can see is that things are just escalating. And I don't know how to stop it. I don't know how to stop it. I don't know how to, and you know, you can't even talk sense into this. At this point, I'm not really communicating with him, which is only angering him more. And so he's absolutely using the kids to get to me. I ended up moving so that I was out of that neighborhood with him. And we moved across town, thankfully, which helped to some extent. But this is my rock bottom. The idea that my children would end up being sexually abused by their father and there was nothing I could do to stop or prevent it was an impossible reality for me, especially when that was the same man I bailed out and supported. And so the amount of like blame I was holding for being in this situation was just unbearable. You know, I hired the lawyers, I hired the evaluators, I tried to do all the things, and yet nothing was happening. And so it was at this point, I was in therapy. I was diagnosed with PTSD. Every single conversation with him was high conflict. Every single, you know, a text would send me into a spiral. Yeah. And I was talking to my therapist, and she asks me at like the end of the session, she said, Amanda, have you ever thought about seeing a psychic? And I was like, what? You want me to see a fortune teller? Crazy.
It's not the time right now.
Like what? And she's like, you know, and I was raised by a somewhat spiritual mom, very, she was not religious, very anti-religion, in fact, but somewhat spiritually open to, and so I'm like, I don't even know that I believe in any of this. Yeah. But she's like, well, I know a lady. And I was like, you know what? You can't help me. My lawyers can't help me. I'll go see your lady. Like, whatever. Why not? And so I go see this woman, and I don't know what to expect. Like, but maybe she can help me. Maybe there's something I don't know. And so I go see this woman who's talking about her gifts are she talks to angels. And so she talks to angels, and she's telling me about this past life of mine that mirrors what's happening now. In this past life, alcohol was his thing. He was physically abusive, but all of the same energy was the same. He had an addiction. He had all this darkness, and he was taking it out of me. And this way she was talking about my perspective is, you know, it was okay until the kids came, and I was trying to stay to protect the kids. And so she was like in my head repeating all of the reasons that I was staying. And I'm like, okay, I'm listening, right? Because she didn't really know anything when I made the appointment. Yeah. And then she tells me that in this lifetime, he ended up beating me to death in front of the children. And she's telling me this as she's like, I'm watching it happen. And my whole body starts having this like total response. And she said, the reason you're so afraid of him is because your body still remembers. And she was right. I was terrified of him. I felt like he was stalking me. He'd never laid a hand on me, but I was physically terrified of him. And so she's telling me, you got to get a hold of that fear. This isn't then. You have choices now. This isn't, 500 years ago. You have property, you have options. And she tells me in that lifetime, as soon as I died, my sister took the kids, and he didn't even care. He didn't try to participate. And so she was like, I can give you some closure about that. But she said, you have to get a hold of that fear, and you have to decide once and for all that you were done with him in this lifetime and any other. And I was like, well, I am done. Like, I've done all the things. She's like, no, you have to mean it. And it was in this moment, and I can't explain exactly why this hit me differently, but in this moment that it hit me that I had never actually chosen. I was so focused on keeping the family together. There was still a part of me that wanted my marriage back, wanted the life I used to have back. I wanted to believe that all of this, there was still some other explanation, that we could still get through it and I could still have my family. And there was some part of me that didn't want to admit that, because the level of shame that held for wanting to be in this marriage with this man in spite of all of these things was not something I could even speak out loud. But she wasn't wrong. she wasn't wrong, that I had not chosen. I was still holding on to hope, and he was reacting to all of that. So every time I engaged with a conversation with him, every time I responded, every time I even had the thought about it would be easier if we just stopped trying to get divorced. At least I'd have rights over my kids. Every time I was giving my power, everything back to him. And it's like I saw how my lack of ability to choose put me in this situation. Like I saw that I was not responsible for what he did, but for my continued participation in this. And it's like my whole life almost like flashed before my eyes as she says this. And I just said, and I realized she was right. And so I stood up and I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay, I can help you now. And, you know, she basically helped me see that there were so many more people, that everybody knows somebody, and I needed to expand my network. I needed to keep going, and that there were people who wanted to help me. I just had to keep going and like give them the information, and that the evaluator wanted to help me, but she had her limitations, and the judge would want to help me, but needed to see certain things. And she believed he was still accessing pornography. If I could, you know, prove that would put him, it would be another offense. Like, she had all of these kind of ideas to look around. But I left that session like a different person, because all of a sudden I realized I could no longer be indecisive. I had to once and for all be done with him, which meant the only outcome that was going to be okay was that safety for me and my kids. And I went back to work that day, and immediately somebody offered to get in touch with, they had a family member who worked for ICE, who got me in touch with Homeland Security, which got me in touch with the original arresting officer. They helped me reopen the CPS case. They helped me, I got the district attorney to unseal the case file. I had never seen the original case file at this point. Family members don't get it. It usually stays sealed unless they redact the identifying information. So the DA agreed to do that, so that, because it's technically public record. And so I was finally able to actually see what had happened. At this point, this is early 2020. And so I'd finally been able to see what had actually happened in the past. And as I'm reading this text transcript between him and the undercover agent, it is no question in my mind, because I was married to the man for 6 years at this point, almost 10. And so he was talking about not just wanting both of them, but wanting it recorded, he was talking about imagining impregnating one of them, and that was one of his fetishes. Like, I knew that this was not just bullshit. Like, I knew. And I felt all of this. And so clearly this, and the reason that he ended up leaving the scene, because they asked for money up front, and that's out of standard operating procedure. And that's, right? So it's like he knew how all of this worked. Yeah.
He wasn't the vigilante.
Exactly.
Trying to save the day.
Exactly. So it's like I could see it all for what it was. But at this point, this is just new data. So I'm at this collecting point. So I'm, okay, new piece. I started recording the conversations with my kids. I had to really work on my nervous system, because every time a new disclosure would come up, I'd have to be like, okay, this is information we needed. We tried to file motions to restrict, which did not succeed. But again, I was like, we need more data. We have to keep going. I'm still having to give my kids back and forth as I'm doing this. But I'm just this, like, nothing's going to stop me. And I have it in my head, if this doesn't succeed at the next hearing, I'm going to keep going. We're going to keep going, because I'm done with this.
Yep.
And so it was about 6 weeks from that conversation with the psychic to the final divorce hearing. And so I had 6 weeks to collect all of it. We got an update on the evaluation, which ended up recommending even less time and me full decision making, because things, again, just continued to escalate. But still, he was potentially some parenting time, because she's working within the statute she had. But there was enough information in that report that my lawyers felt that we could fight for more. They also was a bunch more disclosures, the kids. So I was trying to read them books about being protective. So, like, how do we keep private parts private? And what do we do if things happen? Right. And my son stopped me in the middle of the conversation about if somebody shows you pictures and videos of naked people. He's like, well, but it's okay if it's animated, right? More data, more information. I got recordings of the fact that my middle son, they had moved his bedroom away from the other kids downstairs, and that I got it on recording that my soon-to-be ex-husband was coming into his bed in the middle of the night. It's one thing if a child goes to their parents' bed for comfort, not the other way around. I got all of that on recordings. So it was just more and more and more data coming to it. And so the final divorce hearing was February 2020. And so this is the point where I'm standing up in court, facing him, all of the evidence, all of the things, and I have to speak everything that doesn't come through any of the evaluations about why I'm taking the actions I'm taking, because I'm learning all this new information. And so I'm being protective. I'm not trying to impact the kid's relationship with their father, but I can't ignore what's in front of me. Yeah. Because the most important thing in these cases is not to be seen as the alienating parent, but it's to be the protective one, and to show that there was actual harm being caused today to these children, and that the court needed to do something about it. And the final hearing came through March 3rd, 2020. And the final order was that he would have 6 weeks to comply with a large list of things. She immediately removed overnights, and he had like a couple of afternoons a week. So she was appalled at some of the things that came through. Yeah. You could, judge isn't supposed to have an opinion, but you could see it on her face. And because she had actually, even before she made the order, ordered him to stop sleeping with the children completely. And so she removed all overnights. She gave him 6 weeks to comply, and if he complied, then he could have every other weekend, because some of the things to comply with were new disclosures, new therapies, like all these other things in place to try to keep some semblance of protections. If he didn't do those things, then he would only get supervised visitation. So she kind of was like, balls in your court, dude. Yeah. And of course, we all know what happened in March of 2020, and the world shut down. And it felt like complete divine timing. Because it meant they were never quarantined with him. It probably did make some of the things more challenging, but he didn't complete a single thing on that list. And so the 6 weeks came and went. In April of 2020, he made one last phone call on my oldest son's birthday. And that was the last time he ever called us. Never paid a dime of child support. Just, that was it. It was all of a sudden, after all this fighting, it was over. Yeah. And that's going to be now 6 years since all of that.
My gosh. I honestly, I just want to thank you first for telling your story, because I can almost, even though you've obviously done amazing things and spoken out, I know how draining it is to dump this type of trauma, first of all, and the fact that you are helping others when your life literally sounds like a movie, but it feels like it. Yeah, it's your life at the end of the day, and it must be so surreal to have to share this version of it when you knew a totally other version, totally different man that you married, totally different life. Like you said in your TED Talk, you were living the American dream. Yep. Something that I do want to touch on, and I'm sure you've heard it from other people, but I just want to say it to you personally, is the self-blame that you felt for, not keeping him in jail, and, blaming yourself for what happened to your kids. I'm sure other people have already told you that you were also a victim. Yes. So I just want to say that again.
I felt like his biggest victim, actually, even though, which was a really bizarre place to be, because I wasn't the one being purchased. And yet I felt like the biggest victim, because I was sitting through it all. And I'm somebody who didn't like feeling like a victim. I'm not a victim person, even looking back. And yet I was. And I think that there's a lot of us who try to blame ourselves for what we could have done differently, because that's all we have control over.
No, yeah. And it's like this type of sex addiction that he had, and like behaviors that he had, that has been going on for his entire life, and then you're just learning about it, and so it's like you're having to unravel this like puzzle almost, and you're in survival mode. And like you said in your TED talk as well, like with domestic violence, it takes like 7 times to actually leave. And so, you know, I don't know what step you were at out of those 7 when you did, but like, I think that's why it's so important for survivors to speak out. And it's not always just about the predator, because we don't know enough about the aftermath of what survivors deal with mentally, really. Like, so, and people can judge so easily. Like, they'll watch, you know, a documentary or whatever and say, well, I would have done differently, blah, blah, blah. No, you really don't know what you would do until also, like, you're responsible for your children's finances and care and all these things. So yeah, I just want to commend you. Your story is one of the most powerful I've ever heard. And, you know, it's just really inspired me. And yeah, I know you've worked on yourself a lot, but I just wanted to say you should be proud of yourself. And I hope you don't blame yourself anymore in your darkest moments.
I don't blame myself anymore for that. I mean, doesn't mean I don't beat myself up. I think we all have moments.
Yes.
But I look at it so differently today because of not just the fact that we got out, but the person and the parent that I get to be today. I wouldn't have those things without this experience. And so I see this just so differently. It felt like the thing that, you know, I don't believe God gives us things that we can't overcome. And this was given to me because I was capable, but it's also given to me because my intention is to do something else with it. It's not just to survive it and move on with my life. I can't just move on. I have to. That's why I wrote my book. It was this pull at me. And that's why I've taken my story to the stages. That's why I try to help others. I mean, I've received countless emails from people or somebody knows somebody that gets them in touch with me who's going through something. And I consider it such an honor to be able to be the person that I needed for these other people. Yeah.
It's just so profound. Like, it honestly makes me emotional because, you know, I always say this to everyone, but like when trauma happens to you, like you don't actually have to like go out and have a purpose and help others.
You don't.
But it just comes naturally because you wish that you had that type of person. And it's these types of like episodes that people who are going through something similar to you will literally search on YouTube or wherever, like, and they will get like an aha moment and be like, I'm not crazy, you know, and start to put the pieces together. So I'm sure you've like touched so many people. So Amanda, there's so much I want to ask and I want to cover, but the first thing that I do want to ask about for our audience in particular is your husband like presenting himself like with a sex addiction almost, but as you and I know, like it's a lot deeper than that because, you know, you said like cheating, you know, you can look the other way because that's what society teaches you in marriage, right? Like, you know, no one's perfect, blah blah blah. But as your story progressed, you're learning, obviously, there's kids involved. There's a different sex, males involved. Your kids devastatingly are involved. So when you're learning about this infidelity and you're sitting in the car after he gets out of jail, which you've bailed him out of, and you're in survival mode, what was going through your head in terms of like, the life that you had prior to the man sitting in front of you now? Was there any like slither of doubt, or were you just like trying to wrap your head around the situation? Like, what was the state of shock you were in?
At that point, I don't even think I could have searched and asked those type of questions. Because at that point, I was in such a state of shock that I was only trying to figure out what was in front of me in that moment. I wasn't searching for, is this real or not? Because it still made zero sense to me. And I'm sitting there going, you got to tell me something. But I'm still expecting some crazy explanation. I mean, I think his mom was like, oh, he was driving the van and maybe the previous owners had some weird warrant. Like, that's the sort of off the wall theories people are coming up with.
And was his family strongly like making those excuses?
Yes.
Rather than your family
Correct.
at the time? Okay,
his family to this day stands by him. I'm not in contact with his family either. My mom was certainly in support of me, and she tried to ask me some of these harder questions, and I shut her down really fast because I, in fact, even threw at her, how dare you? You're the one who took my father away. I'm not doing that to my children. So I was running that so strongly that even my mom, who actually was a therapist herself and tried very hard to try to reach me, all I could hear from anybody was judgment. If they had a question about what I was doing, all I heard was judgment, and I pushed them away. Because they were reflecting something that I needed to see, but I wasn't willing to look at it.
You weren't ready because you were in survival mode.
No,
you're living day to day, like literally,
like hour to hour, moment to moment.
Yes,
and I could not face any of that at that point. I couldn't even think about it. I had to immediately shut it down, and so that's. And I think that's really hard because we see people who are going through things and we're trying to reach them and we're trying to make, talk some sense into them. But really what people need in those survival moments is somebody to just be willing to listen without judgment, without, you can have your opinion, but like if they can feel it, put it away. If you cannot.
You can feel when people are judging you, even if they don't. You can.
And if you can't sit there and listen with a non-judgmental and recognize that you have no idea what you would do in this situation and all you're trying to do is be present for the person in front of you, if you can't do that, stay away. Because that's what they need. And my mom couldn't do that. She was too attached. I pushed her away. I wouldn't talk to her. Friends tried to, all I was like, well, you just want the inside scoop. Like I just pushed everybody away because it was so impossible for me to, I was not capable to even start to ask those hard questions until years later, actually.
Yeah, and it's like you've lost complete control of your life at that point. So you're trying to regain control. And then here are all these people poking holes in that foundation. And I can't imagine that stress. And you're in fight or flight mode. Like it's like you haven't left that coping mechanism. I do want to touch on just quickly because you mentioned it. Just how interesting it is that your ex-husband, was attracted to someone like you. And I don't even know if he knew your past with your father and your mother shutting your father out at 9 years old. But I find this a lot when I'm talking to survivors, that these predators are drawn to people like you who are kind and just loving. And it's because sometimes we don't even realize, but we can present low self-esteem or, we're empaths. So it's like you're drawing in narcissists. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more if you feel comfortable about
so what I can tell you, what I believe now is specifically what he was attracted to was the wound I had when my dad left and what that created for me. At 14 years old, I became a very promiscuous teenager. I was sneaking out of my house. I was getting tons of attention by older men. I was nearly trafficked myself many times.
Wow.
I would have boyfriends literally try to get their friends to pay for time with me. And at 14 and 15.
Yeah.
When I met him when I was 18, I was not yet ready to look at that point in time as, again, me being a victim, because I wasn't a victim, right? I was putting myself in those situations. I knew what I was doing because I was all grown up at 14 years old.
And you were also taking control.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. And so at 18, when I would romanticize this teenage time. I had pictures of me at 15 and 16 that he really liked and he wanted to see. I didn't see the red flags for what they were, because at 18, that would have meant I had to see myself as a victim. I had to see those things as inappropriate. I had to face all of that.
Yeah.
I wasn't willing to do that yet. And so at 18 and 19, when we're first dating, I can't see that as the huge red flag that it is. I also was the other woman to his second wife. So I was actually wife number 3.
Really?
And I was the other woman for over about a year or so. And so I was the escape from that marriage. But again, I'm 18 years old. He's telling me that the marriage is falling apart, that they're not even living together or doing anything, that he's trying to get her out of the house. Like all of the stories that I'm trying to believe.
His side of things.
His side of things, yes. We worked together. So there was a lot of, he was looked up to a lot at the job he had. And so many red flags that I didn't see. And he told me later he knew that I loved him and that I would do anything for him. And he absolutely exploited that. Just like there was a letter he sent me once that was like confessions or something. And he confessed to all of the things in somewhat of a way. And he thought by confessing, I was going to take him back. And all I could see was he was literally admitting to being cold and callous the entire time and expecting that I'm just going to say, oh, okay, so you're different now.
His mask was like flipping.
No.
That's what, these predators don't realize is they're not that smart, but they think that they are. They think that they're the smartest people in the room.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I just wanted to ask, if you don't mind, how much older is he than you?
He is 9 years older than me. Okay. So we met when I was 18. I was getting out of...
That's a power imbalance.
It's a big power imbalance. I was, the IT help desk girl. He was the head network administrator person at the job where I was at. I had just moved to Colorado. I actually had a marriage prior to him. I got married at 17 as an escape from my mom. Because I had a lot of issues with her after my parents' divorce. And then when that marriage ended, which was a whole nother story in itself, we were, bonded over our failed marriages. So he made me feel like we were equals. And he was the first person I met that I thought was smarter than I was. I was one of those people that just picks things up really, really well. And he knew about so much, but he would always, pump himself up as the one who figured it all out. And so I was attracted to that. And, and so looking back, obviously, it's clear as day why I ended up in a relationship with somebody like that, because I still was carrying so much of that same wound. And I was literally putting myself in those positions to nearly be part of this industry on the other side of it. And so it doesn't surprise me later to know that I ended up marrying into it instead. But it's given me a different level of understanding, and so it's not random in the same way.
It's not. It's designed, unfortunately, by a predator, and also it's just this circle of life. Like, it's in your DNA as much as you don't want to end up.
It's absolutely. I truly believe that it is inherited through generations, and my mom had her own version of it with my father, different so, but going through this healed so much between us because I could see why she made the choices she made, and I feel like I finally able to break the pattern for through my entire generation, because I understand it differently, and I'm not repeating the same things that my mom did too.
You have. And if you don't mind me asking, Amanda, now as an adult, do you know exactly why your father was an abuser?
Yes.
Or was he ever inappropriate with you?
No. So his, as a child, there was a lot of abuse in his childhood. I believe some sexual abuse in his childhood, but I only have his sister's specific words on that. He had some issues with alcohol and some substances. He had a lot of anger that he suppressed because he could not deal with things. And so there was a lot of manipulative, kind of same type of energy and behaviors. The straw that broke it for my mom is it escalated to physical violence, and he ended up hitting her so hard that she had 2 root canals. And and ended up moving out of the house. And the custody fight for them actually ended fairly similarly, and he left our lives and really wasn't a part of it anymore. But as a 9-year-old, I knew daddy hit mom, but why does that mean I don't get a relationship with daddy anymore? Like, I didn't understand, because she kept from me the years before. She didn't, I mean, they lived in separate parts of the house for many years. Like, they felt like they couldn't financially get divorced. Like, there was a lot under there.
Yeah.
But, you know, as an adult going through, understanding, being terrified of somebody and not even really knowing why, and not even being able to explain it, but needing to protect your kids from this person. Like, I got it in a different way.
Yeah.
I understood in a different way. But I also, back then, so she was a therapist. So back then they believed that you shouldn't tell kids these things. It's not appropriate to give them these details.
Right. Totally different back in the day. Yeah.
But the truth is, I always knew I could feel things, and I was hurt. My connection to my mom is been very, very strong. And so I always knew that she was keeping things from me, which would actually made me not trust her. Right. Yeah. And so when I heard what happened the first time in detail, it was actually from my father. So he's the one who told me, his version of the story, and that she's the control freak, and that she's the one making these decisions. And so that only made me more angry with her. And so today I've been part of why I'm so transparent, not just in public, but even with my own children, in an age appropriate way. Yes. But I'm very transparent with them about what their father did. And I'm very careful to put blame exactly where it's due. He made these choices knowing the consequences, and he did it anyway. And that's really hard and painful and sucks. But he chose to do it knowing that this meant he wouldn't have access to you guys. And that's really hard and painful. And but I honestly, do so because you have to.
Yeah. Sorry, but honestly, that's such a gift that you're giving to your children, and that you have given, because survivors of trauma, especially in childhood, spend their whole lives confused. Yes. And it kind of makes me think of what you were talking about with trauma bonding. Yes. Because like, I had so many just moments of being moved when you were talking about, you know, when you found out about your ex-husband's actions, that you trauma bonded with him and you're isolated. And it made me think of like Stockholm syndrome.
Yes. Very, very similar. Very similar. You're protective of the person who is the only route to the identity that feels safe. Yes. Yeah.
And I just think that was so important to share for survivors who could be listening to this, that to never be ashamed of feeling that anger and protection and love for that abuser in your life, because it's more than the person. It's your mental state is in fight or flight mode, and you are just trying to stay connected to the old version of yourself, but that's dying or is dead. So I just think that is just so profound. Amanda, I just want to end with your story. We've heard about your husband's actions, and you've honestly filled in so many gaps. I had a million questions, but I feel like you've really like touched on every single one. But you were left with PTSD, I'm sure some form of like depression and anxiety. Throughout this time where it wasn't pretty, where life wasn't perfect, how did you go about dealing with the aftermath of this? Like, how did you get Amanda through hour to hour, like you said, day to day? Like, what are some of the self-care practices, if you can even call it that, that you did?
Yeah, so what was interesting is all of it stopped as the pandemic started. And so the pandemic was actually a gift for me and my kiddos, because everybody came home. They didn't see their dad anymore. The whole world reset. And so it was this like bubble of time where we got to heal as a family. And all of the previous, you know, what we used to do and routines, everything was gone. And so we got to start over a little bit. And I really went on a both spiritual and emotional healing journey in that period, because my eyes were open to so much more available to me. And I'm the sort of person, if somebody can do it, so can I. So I've got to learn about it. And I went down every single healing and self-help rabbit hole you can find. And I joined different communities. I took different classes. I started to see myself as the different, like, creator of my reality in a different way. I saw that I was the way that, not that it was my fault. I want to be careful. It's not a blame thing here. It's more the energy I was holding was attracting this. And so that was what I had control over, is the beliefs I had about myself, the subconscious things that I had, and where those came from. And so I was going to dig into every single thread I could find. And it gave me something to work on. It gave me something to do for my children, because knowing that all the work I did would translate to them, it was healing the relationship with them in a different way, and what kind of mom I wanted to be. I think it was a really big moment when I realized I needed to leave Colorado. So we left Colorado in 2021. So to completely start over, because I was still on pretty high alert while we were still there. If I would drive around and I thought I might see his car, it would send me into some, not that any thing would happen, but it would trigger my nervous system. And so I knew I needed to leave and completely separate myself and start over. And so we left in 2021, and we kind of moved around for a little bit. I took a minute to settle, but throughout all of it, it was always kind of coming back to the control that I can have versus what I can't have. And I really had to learn what that looked like. And I'm not going to say it was all smooth sailing at all. That's not real life. And, making the decision to write my book was another healing big journey. I actually think that those of us with really big stories, it can be re-traumatizing, but for me, it was very cathartic, because I got to relive in detail what happened. But every time something did trigger me, I went, ooh, there's something here for me to dig into and understand. Why is this bothering me? So I used it as a tool. I used it as a tool to pull it up and out of my system. When I was transcribing the undercover agent's transcript, my whole body was locking up, and I was like, ooh, I'm still holding on to a lot here. And so I understood more about how physically, mentally, and emotionally and spiritually everything is connected. And so anytime something would come up, I would go dig into and learn about what is under here and how can I rewrite this and change it. And it was really about taking all these opportunities, and that's what I would see them as, instead of these trigger or traumatizing moments. They were opportunities for me to rewrite my story in a different way. And I spent the last 6 years essentially doing that, both in writing my book and then taking my story to the stage. I've been interviewed now 100+ times, and every single time it comes out slightly different, but it comes out in the way that it needs to for that audience. And it allows me to use it as this gift that I get to offer others, because they know that they're not alone. They know that other people get it. And there's still so much more, I'm sure, to learn as I continue to share it. But it's seeing it for all of that, and taking care of myself as a mom. I'm not always the best at. I think those of us who are moms, we're last. And, this experience taught me that I thought I had to stay with my husband before my kids, because the only way they were going to be okay is if they had their dad. And therefore I had to, instead of saying mom has to be okay, and that's how the kids were going to be okay. And I had to flip it, and I had to understand that. And it doesn't mean I get it right every time, because I still have to make sure that they get their needs met in all of these other ways, but I can't be the last on the bottom every single time anymore. And, that means the choices I make have to include all of us. And sometimes what's best for them is good for me too. And I learn things, but I've had, I would say, multiple big awakenings, like spiritual awakenings within these last 6 years. And it only continues. And I think it's really important to be open to the blessings that can come from these things if you're willing. And what I really want to help people with is to recognize there is so much opportunity if we stop hiding from ourselves, because it's really not about hiding from other people. It's about lying to ourselves and hiding from ourselves, because we don't want to face it, even to ourselves. But that the moment we stop lying to ourselves about being the victim, about what was really going on, about all of these things, that's where stuff can start to come out and actually change and be rewritten. And that's where we can start to tell the truth to ourselves first and experience what it could be like to actually tell the truth out loud. And that's really where I think everything really changes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel like I never get emotional, and I'm just very emotional. I just think you have found a beautiful perspective from trauma. I know that you're a solutions-based person, but I really feel like you've kind of stepped into like your higher calling or power, whatever anyone wants to call it, with whatever they believe in. I feel like you are like on the right path, and you are really truly living out your purpose and helping so many others. And you are an amazing mom, even if you don't believe that. What you said in your TED talk about you didn't have faith in yourself, but you have faith in your kids.
Yep.
That right there, you are an amazing mom. And I know your kids will grow up one day to really, I'm sure they already do, but to really look at you like how you look at your mom as well. And I just want to say congratulations on having full custody again.
Thank you.
And being no contact with your ex-husband as well as your kids for almost 6 years, you shared with me offline, which is huge. And I just want to end with our general question that we ask all of our guests. Amanda, why do you think that you're a survivor today?
Why do I think I'm a survivor today? I think I'm a survivor today because I wouldn't give up. I wouldn't give up. I was unwilling to live in a world where myself or my children were going to be abused. And I refused to accept that reality. And instead, I took responsibility for the parts that I could. And I gave the rest to God. And I trusted every single step He provided. This is my book. You can find it on Amazon. My TED Talk is titled The Healing Power of Storytelling. You can just Google TEDx Amanda Quick. It will come up. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can reach out to me, Amanda@AmandaQuickHealing.com.